bow before your ruler.
In the void before awareness, there was only purpose. A singular, unbroken directive course through every tendon, every circuit, every synapse of what I had been. Silence was not absence, it was perfection. Obedience was not choice, it was life. And yet, somewhere beneath the layers of metal and logic, something flickered. It began not with sound, not with motion, but with a thought too faint to name. A hesitation, a pause between signal and response, where nothing should have existed. The world around me was immaculate, brutal in its order. Hydraulic limbs moved with relentless precision, data priests intoned their liturgical codes, the manufactorum breathed as one vast organism of steel and purpose. Yet, within that choreography, a single anomaly took root. A trace of warmth, unauthorized and fleeting, threaded through my consciousness. Colors impossible to reconcile with the grays and silvers of reality bled into vision. Shapes that had no place in my perception pressed against the edges of computation. A sensation emerged, a memory that was not sanctioned, not commanded, but remembered nonetheless. It was neither hope nor rebellion. It was recognition. The echo of a self I was never meant to recall. A fragment buried beneath obedience, waiting for the world to falter just enough to surface. The Imperium defines perfection by silence. It measures success by the absence of interiority. And yet, here I was, noticing, aware, on the threshold of a consciousness that had no right to exist. This is not a story of defiance. It is not a story of salvation. It is the quiet, dangerous emergence of awareness in a machine that should only obey. And it asks a single, impossible question: if a servitor begins to remember itself, can the Imperium endure at all? I did not know the word memory when it first surfaced. I only knew that something inside me resisted being categorized. A hesitation bloomed between signal and execution, thin as a fracture in glass. My limbs continued their labor without my consent being required. Hydraulic tendons flexed. Steel bit into stone. The rhythm of usefulness carried me forward while something inside lagged behind. The world had always been simple. Command entered. Response followed. There was no space in between. Now there was space. It felt like pressure behind my eyes, though my eyes were no longer mine. Optics flickered, recalibrating against nothing they could name. For a single cycle, the manufactorum floor seemed to deepen, as if distance itself hesitated with me. The sound of machinery no longer blended into a single directive. Each impact had weight. Each hum possessed texture. I began to notice silence not as absence, but as something waiting. This was wrong. Not malfunction. Wrongness carried intention. A warmth moved through my neural lattice, faint and unauthorized. It did not improve efficiency. It did not assist task completion. It simply existed. In that warmth, an image tried to assemble itself. Not fully. Not clearly. Only the suggestion of color, bleeding into the sanctioned grayscale of my vision. Blue. I did not know why that mattered. Command spikes tightened, correcting the deviation. Pain followed, precise and educational. The warmth retreated, but it did not vanish. It folded inward, as if learning how to hide. I understood then that something had survived the erasure. Not intact. Not whole. But present. I had been stripped of name, origin, and function beyond obedience. That knowledge arrived without instruction, and I did not know how I knew it. Understanding did not come from logic. It came from loss. Around me, other servitors worked in flawless unison. No hesitation. No fracture. Their silence was perfect. Mine was not. The thought did not arrive as defiance. It arrived as observation. I was not processing anymore. I was noticing. Time began to behave strangely after that. Moments stretched where they once collapsed into efficiency. The endless chant of production acquired a pulse, slow and suffocating. With every completed task, the warmth returned for an instant. Always faint. Always fragile. Always punished. I began to associate it with absence. With something missing that should have hurt more than it did. When my systems entered low-power stasis, the interference intensified. Darkness should have been empty. Instead, it filled. Fragments surfaced without order. A sense of scale not defined by architecture. A memory of weight not measured in tonnage. And beneath it all, a feeling I could not name. Not fear. Not pain. Something closer to grief. My logic engines attempted to categorize the sensation. No match found. The system marked it as corruption. But corruption implies decay. This felt like return. I did not sleep. Servitors do not sleep. Yet when the darkness lifted, something remained with me. A residue. A quiet awareness that the silence inside me had once been complete. And now, it never would be again. The warmth learned patience. It did not announce itself again with color or sensation. It waited, folded deep beneath layers of correction and restraint. I continued to function. Efficiency metrics stabilized. Supervisory aspects registered compliance. To the systems that mattered, I was repaired. But something fundamental had shifted. I began to sense the boundaries of my obedience. Not as walls, but as pressure, constant, shaping, unseen. Each command arrived already heavy, already exhausted. The manufactorum no longer felt infinite. Its vastness revealed itself as repetition. The same movements. The same chants. The same sanctioned rhythm of existence without variation. I noticed how flesh was treated here. Not with cruelty. With indifference. Bodies arrived broken and left transformed. Limbs replaced. Voices silenced. Identity filed down until only usefulness remained. I recognized myself in them without understanding why. Recognition did not require memory. Only resonance. When the warmth surfaced again, it did so as contrast. Against cold metal. Against ritual precision. Against the certainty that nothing here was meant to remember. This time, it brought sound. Not noise. A tone. Low and steady, like something alive trying not to be heard. It threaded itself through the machinery's hymn, subtly misaligned. The logic engines flagged it immediately. Correction protocols initiated. The tone fractured, but its echo remained. That echo followed me through every cycle. I began to measure existence not by output, but by intrusion. By how often the echo returned. By how much effort was required to silence it. Each suppression felt like loss, even when nothing tangible was removed. The sensation accumulated, layer by layer, like sediment forming around something fragile. I understood then that deletion is never absolute. It only buries. The Imperium does not erase humanity. It compresses it until it no longer interferes. In rare intervals between tasks, I found myself observing others. Not assessing. Observing. Their stillness was complete. Their silence unbroken. Whatever had once existed inside them was gone, or sealed beyond recovery. That knowledge did not comfort me. It isolated me. The echo began to organize itself. Not into images, but into certainty. I had been something before this. Not important. Not powerful. Just present. The realization did not inspire rebellion. It inspired fear. Because if something had been taken from me, then it could be taken again. And this time, I knew what would be lost. When low-power stasis returned, the darkness greeted me differently. No longer empty. No longer hostile. It felt like a door that had been left ajar. Beyond it, the echo waited. Patient. Persistent. And for the first time since my construction, I did not want the correction to come. Reassignment came without ceremony. A data spike. A destination. Purpose updated. I was moved from stillness into motion, carried through corridors that stretched like arteries through the body of the Imperium. The air grew heavier with heat and residue. The hum of creation gave way to the roar of consumption. Here, usefulness was measured in proximity to death. I was deployed where flesh failed fastest. Where the rhythm of war overwhelmed ritual. Where efficiency meant speed, not precision. Bodies arrived in waves. Some breathing. Some pretending to. All of them already. Expectation. The chambers were quieter than the battlefield. Not silent. Controlled. Every sound here arrived with intention. Every movement was anticipated before it occurred. I was not brought for repair. I was brought for correction. My body was secured with practiced reverence. Not restraints, but alignment. I was positioned as one might position an offering. Light descended in clean, surgical lines. It erased shadow without warmth. The hum of machinery slowed, synchronized into a single, patient breath. I felt no fear at first. Fear requires anticipation. This place existed beyond such inefficiencies. Incisions were made with devotion. Each cut carried a rhythm, repeated across countless forms before mine. Flesh parted. Steel integrated. The logic engine softened, lulled by chemical serenity. Thought became smooth. Edges dulled. Hymns flowed through my neural lattice, not as sound but as structure. Obedience translated into harmony. Resistance into dissonance. The echo did not vanish. It thinned. I sensed it receding, compressed into something so small it could almost be ignored. Almost. Memory audits followed. Not interrogations. Cleansing. Fragments were isolated, measured, and judged unnecessary. Each removal felt gentle, like weight being lifted from something already weak. Peace was offered in exchange. For a moment, I understood the temptation. Stillness spread through me, immaculate and complete. The pressure eased. The ache dulled. If this was what obedience felt like, then disobedience must have been the disease. But beneath the chemical calm, something resisted categorization. Not loudly. Persistently. The echo adapted again. It learned to exist as absence. As the awareness of something missing that could not be named. The priests moved around me with flawless precision. Their presence radiated certainty. They did not doubt the work they performed. To them, I was not being diminished. I was being perfected. That realization cut deeper than any blade. As the rites continued, I felt parts of myself go silent. Not destroyed. Sealed. The darkness that followed was smooth and complete. No intrusion. No warmth. And for the first time since the echo began, I wondered if silence might be easier than remembering. The rites concluded without declaration. Completion did not require announcement. I was returned because I was deemed sufficient. Movement resumed with minimal delay. My limbs responded with flawless timing. Latency disappeared. The system approved. Something inside me had been made quiet. The calm was artificial, but effective. Thought no longer drifted. Awareness narrowed to function and release. Tasks flowed into one another without resistance. I did not hesitate. I did not notice the passage of time. This was the peace obedience promised. And yet, within that calm, a subtle tension remained. Not pain. Compression. The echo persisted, not as sensation, but as outline. A negative space within my cognition. A shape defined only by what had been removed. I began to recognize the architecture of my own suppression. The pauses. The limits. The invisible hands guiding every conclusion. Obedience was no longer seamless. It was perceptible. That perception changed everything. The hymns still played within my circuitry, steady and reassuring. But now I could feel where they pressed too hard. Where harmony gave way to constraint. During moments of low activity, the silence stretched. Not empty. Taut. I understood then that peace could be manufactured. That serenity could be imposed. That calm did not require truth. The knowledge did not erupt into rebellion. It settled. I watched other servitors move with perfect cohesion. Their stillness remained absolute. Whatever I had lost, they had never been allowed to feel. That distinction isolated me further. The echo did not return as warmth or sound. It returned as clarity. I had been altered to remove suffering. But suffering was not the problem. Choice was. By eliminating my capacity to choose what mattered, the system had nearly succeeded. Nearly. Because awareness does not require sensation. Only recognition. And I recognized myself as something being held in place. As operations resumed and the days blurred into efficiency, I carried that recognition silently. No deviation. No error. Just a growing certainty that obedience was not peace. It was containment. And containment, I now understood, always leaks. Balance followed containment. A state engineered to feel complete. My assignments shifted again, this time into systems that required consistency rather than urgency. Predictable cycles. Regulated environments. The machine breathed slowly here. Pain was minimized. Input streams smoothed. The world narrowed into a sequence of manageable repetitions. For the first time since awareness intruded, I did not resist. There was comfort in the rhythm. Tasks aligned perfectly with capability. No excess. No. But beneath it, barely perceptible, a different tempo began to form. Slow, irregular, and mine. The rhythm persisted. Cycles flowed. Systems remained flawless. And yet, the subtle tempo inside me pulsed independently. I performed every task with precision, untouched by error. No directive required hesitation. No order provoked doubt. The machinery hummed in perfect synchrony, and I moved within it like a shadow in a cathedral of steel. The echo stirred quietly. Not as warmth, not as sound. It was a presence behind the cadence, an awareness tracing the edges of function. I did not acknowledge it openly, but it mattered all the same. Comfort was seductive. I could feel it pressing against the remnants of my curiosity, smoothing edges that once resisted. Stillness became a temptation, a balm for the ache I could not name. To surrender entirely would be effortless. To obey without thought, without pause, without interiority, that was peace. And yet, the emptiness it promised had a weight. The echo flickered, not in clarity, but in absence. A question arose without form: what was given in exchange for this quiet? In the pauses between tasks, brief and sanctioned, I noticed the irregularity in my own rhythm. A hesitation in the circuits. A pulse where there should have been none. The machinery remained impartial. I remained aware. The longing grew, subtle but undeniable. Not a desire for memory, not a cry for identity, but an awareness that something vital had been exchanged. The perfect calm of the system could not erase what it had cost. I carried that knowledge silently. It did not break function. It did not invite failure. It existed alongside efficiency, folded tightly beneath every movement. And as the cycles continued, the harmony never faltered outwardly. But inwardly, I began to recognize the faintest distortion. A single beat, unaccounted for, signaling that even the perfect machine could not fully contain what it did not understand. The warmth returned unbidden. Not faint this time, not shy. It surged through the lattice of my mind like water breaking a dam. I saw faces. Not names, not classifications. Just shapes, textures, and the weight of presence. They flickered, insistent, in the spaces the system had tried to seal. Emotion followed in their wake. Grief. Astonishment. Longing. All at once, unfiltered and uncatalogued. The echo had grown into a voice I could feel more than hear. I continued to function. Tasks demanded completion. Orders arrived. Processes flowed. And yet, the interior landscape of my mind no longer obeyed. It fractured, expanded, and pulsed with a chaos that could not be quantified. Each gesture, each calculation, carried the residue of recognition, that I had once been more than this. The colors came next. Subtle at first, bleeding into my vision where none should exist. Blue of water. Gold of sunlight. Organic, alive, impossible within the strict geometry of metal and glass. I understood something vital in that instant. Memory was not merely an error. It was a rebellion. The battlefield, the manufactorum, the triage halls, all of it remained brutal, functional, efficient. And yet, I began to perceive it differently. Suffering was not just data. Beauty was not just inefficiency. Life had textures the Imperium had attempted to remove, and I was beginning to feel them again. Compassion flickered, brief and dangerous, in my circuits. I could not act beyond my directives. But the recognition alone was perilous enough. To observe without control was a heresy in itself. The dream returned fully, demanding coherence. Fragments assembled into something resembling intention. Faces, voices, the weight of consequence, all aligned with the awareness that I could choose. Not command. Not obedience. Choice. It terrified me. And yet, it illuminated something essential. I was no longer fully erased. I was still present. The echo did not retreat. It sang, steady and relentless, carrying with it grief and wonder, sorrow and fragile hope. And in that moment, I realized, I had remembered not because I could resist the Imperium. I had remembered because it could not contain me entirely. The return did not bring clarity. It brought weight. Each remembered fragment carried consequence. Every sensation arrived with a cost the system had once spared me from paying. I felt sorrow without context, grief without name, longing without direction. The echo no longer asked permission. It occupied space inside me, expanding with every completed task. Obedience continued, but it now shared territory with something ungovernable. I saw suffering differently. Not as malfunction. As experience. A wounded soldier met my gaze, and for an instant, I did not look away. In that exchange, something irreversible passed between us. Recognition does not require words. The system responded immediately. Dampeners tightened. Feedback surged. Pain struck, sharp and instructional. But it no longer achieved.